everybody's roadmap is subjective. If your boss says jump and you say how high, and in the middle of the year that throws off your whole plan, it happens, okay? There are projects all the time that in January I think are going to be the most important initiative of the year, and by March we're not even working on it because something else has exploded in the company. But you want to go in with somewhat of a plan of, hey, here's what I want to be doing so that I can measure whether or not I'm staying on track. It's okay to not be on track, but we want to have something to compare against. Welcome back to Secrets of a Corporate Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtain and unveil some of those secrets with tips and tricks that you can apply today to start taking control of your career and progress up the ladder faster. Welcome back. I'm your host, Kendall Berg, and today we are talking about setting goals for the new year. We are kicking off 2024 with a bang and trying to make sure that you guys are as prepared as possible for what you can expect in the new year. So this time of year is always very exciting. We're hopefully coming back from a little bit of a break. We're rejuvenated. We're ready to hit the workforce at a full speed sprint. What do you do next? So a lot of the time you'll be given the guidance that when you create your goals for the new year, your goals need to be SMART. Right? There's an acronym for that. But what I'm going to challenge you to do today instead is think more holistically about your career development and how you can prepare for a new year where you're going to find a lot more success. So first off, when you think about your goals, I want you to think in 3 different categories. So the first category is what I'm going to call core. So core goals are what is specific to your work, what is specific to your job. It may be what was listed in the job description when you applied for it, but these are going to be core tasks that you need to achieve. These could be repeatable tasks in BAU or business as usual, or they could be unique tasks, but that you are required to work on in order to be able to get, let's say, a 3 out of 5 on your job year-end evaluation. So your core tasks are going to be those things that are really instrumental to making sure you're achieving expectations at your level. Then you're going to think about a second category, which is what we're going to call the high impact projects. These are going to be ideas that you generate, that you have identified gaps within your organization. They might be within your scope or outside of your scope, but they're going to drive the company forward. So a high impact project could be things like automation, could be things like process improvement. It could be introducing a new program. This is something that I've talked about on the podcast before. But in my experience, a lot of high impact projects can be culture oriented. So for me, I really value innovation. I think it's an area that a lot of companies struggle to do effectively. It's an area where you can easily get lost in the shuffle. So when I think of adding high impact to my organization, I think, how do we spur and ignite innovation across the company? And for me, that could be creating a new program where people solicit ideas. It could be a new program where we're able to then go work on those ideas and provide funding. I've done that at a couple of different companies that I've worked at. And so think about what would be high impact. It doesn't just have to be, hey, here's my job better. It could be my company doesn't have cohesive branding, right? We don't have consistent slides. Depending on who makes them, you can tell where the slide deck came from. So maybe the work that you want to do is, hey, I want to create a standardized slide deck that my company or my part of the organization can use so that we have cohesive messaging, right? That may not necessarily be specific to your role. It may not have anything to do with your job, but it's going to add value to the organization. It's going to add direction to your team, and it is a high impact work. The second thing to consider with high impact projects is you do not have to be the person who executes that work. A lot of the time, if we come up with an idea that's, let's say, outside of our scope, it's going to impact multiple different teams and may not be given to us to run, but the work may still get done. If that's the case, then you should take credit for that. That should be a goal that you achieved, even though you are not part of the overall execution. So when you're thinking about goal setting for a new year, what are some of those high impact areas that you see are not being filled with the current workforce? The third category of goals that you're going to set for yourself is personal development. So often I will work with clients or I will talk to people in the corporate world who are reading self-development books, they're listening to podcasts, they're working with a coach, they have a mentor, and yet their boss has no idea. And so if you're trying to set goals for yourself, one of those goals should be related to how are you dedicating time to making yourself better? Maybe you want to read 4 self-development books this year. Maybe you want to attend a training focused on leadership and management experience. Maybe you want to get better at your executive presence and presenting to senior leadership, and that's a skill that you're going to build over the next 12 months. What are some of those self-development opportunities that you have that you want to go focus on in the new year? This is why January is such a big time for new clients to come into my program, because it's a great thing to put on your goal list. Hey, I want to improve my ability to navigate the corporate world, build more leadership and management skills, and I'm investing in myself to do that. So think about the goals in those 3 categories when you're trying to think of the work that you want to do for the new year. The second piece of this is that those goals should all align with your company or organizational goals. So not all companies do a great job of creating goals at the highest level and then trickling it down to the individual. A lot of the time, information can get lost in the shuffle. But think about what's going to be important to your team. Something that I've been working on the last 12 months in my organization is automation. We're scaling, we're growing, we have more volume. We cannot do things the way that we used to do things. So what's our plan to automate and to drive efficiencies? That's the big priority. And that can show up in all 3 categories of your goals. You could have core work related to automation. Hey, these reports that I run, I want to automate those. You could have high impact work related to automation, saying, hey, I want to do a deep dive analysis into these 2 processes and figure out how we make them better. And you could have self-development related to that. Hey, I want to learn a new skill. I'm going to get certified in Power BI so that I can build automation on these reports. So think about what the goals are for your organization. What are the goals for your company? What's coming down from your senior leadership? And how does that translate to your role specifically? So once you get an idea for what those goals are, then you're going to assign a realistic timeline for where you expect them to be done. Please do not say you're working on all your goals. They're all going to be done end of year. It's a big mistake I see people make, and then it becomes really hard to prioritize what is most important. Now, hey, I'm going to read 4 self-development books. Maybe that one is end of year because you're going to read 1 a quarter. Maybe if it's, hey, I'm going to attend this leadership training, the leadership training is in April, so it's going to be done by the end of April. Come up with realistic times that you feel you can accomplish this work and assign the work. That will help you to prioritize what's most important. The other thing you're going to do when you establish your goals is identify who are the different people you're going to need to get this work done, right? Not everything happens in isolation. In fact, very few of us work in isolation unless you have a highly technical role. So where are all of the collaboration opportunities that relate to each of your individual goals? And how senior do the people you collaborate with need to be in order to get the traction that you're going to need in order to get it done? This is important because not only is it going to set you up for success in goal setting, but it's also going to mean that at the end of the year, when you look back on the work you do, you have a paper trail of, hey, I had this idea. Here was my goal. Here's when I thought I would be done. And here's the groups that I was going to work with. Did I do it? Yes. Then all of that becomes an achievement that you package for year end. So you want to think about your goals forward thinking. Now, another good rule of thumb that I like to apply is you should have at least 1 goal that you're worried you won't hit. This is very contrary to the way a lot of companies and managers make their goals. We have a tendency to only want to write things in our goal sheet that we know we're going to do, right? We're very focused on that achievement. But if you don't create at least 1 stretch goal, then you're very comfortable in the work that you're doing. And I would argue that most of your ideas are probably not big enough. Having 1 idea you may not achieve is okay, because at the end of the year, you'll say, hey, this was deprioritized because of these initiatives, or we were unable to get buy-in from these groups. But you can show the work that you did to try and progress that forward, and it will still speak to your ability to think strategically. Something we talk about a lot in career progression is how do you become a thought leader? And it's a very buzzwordy term. It gets overused all of the time. But one of the ways that you become a thought leader is just by sharing your thoughts. It sounds simple. And I know that you're thinking, this is stupid. Like everybody knows that to be a thought leader, you have to share what you're thinking. But so many people don't. You think, oh, I have this great idea, but we probably won't ever do it. Or I don't know how it would get done, so I just won't say anything. If you have something that you think would be good for the company, put it in that goal list. Make it your stretch goal, at least 1 stretch goal every year. And like I said, you don't have to achieve it. And as long as you can explain why the goal was not achieved, it's not going to count against you in a year-end review. But what it does is it sets you up for success. If you do achieve it, that's a huge win. You have completely knocked it out of the park. You've gone above and beyond the expectations of yourself and from your leadership. But if you don't achieve it, hey, I did great work in this direction. It's just going to take longer than I thought. Or I did great work in this direction, but it was ultimately deemed not a viable business case. That's fine too. So think about how you're going to set those goals and how you're going to set yourself up for success. And then the last piece is figure out what your KPIs, your key performance indicators are to measure whether or not you achieved each of those goals. Some of these may be yes, no. Did not exist, does exist. I'll give you an example. One of my goals for the past few years has been building scale. That means that there is less that I'm doing and more that my team is doing to provide them the opportunities to be successful. When you're building scale, it's very hard to measure, right? It's not like I'm going to be doing less work and I can measure it in my time because I'm going to be taking on other initiatives. And it's not like I can measure it in my team's work because ideally we should not be overloading them to the point that they've got more than 40 hours anyways. So when I think of measuring a goal like that, I think yes, no. Did more get delegated? Yes or no? But where possible, you want to create a more clear measure of success. So I'm going to automate this report. My goal is a 10% efficiency gain. I want to save one of my people 4 hours a month of work. Maybe that is your goal for that particular project. Maybe it's I want to save time in running the report, and by automating that report, we should save money. So figure out what are your measurements of success, and then how are you going to measure them, right? Not all of your goals are going to need a really complex dashboard or some type of reporting, but how are you going to get validation that the work you're doing got done and got done with a high level of execution? So to give a more creative example, because a lot of the time my background is in data analytics and I'll share the analysis version. Say you're in marketing and you want to get promoted to manager at the end of the year. You've got your core goals. Hey, I want to successfully run the campaigns in my specific space. You've got an impact goal of I want to create a best practice marketing playbook that we can all follow when we're initiating new campaigns to ensure we're streamlined and efficient. And then you've got a self-development goal that is, I want to read 4 self-development books this year. And then you have a stretch goal of, I want to work with IT to build an intake mechanism for new campaign requests. That could be great. Maybe you don't build a new intake form for campaign requests. Maybe it's decided that that's not worth the time or it doesn't have a valid business case. But it's a great way of showing, hey, I'm thinking forward about how do I integrate our teams with other groups? How do I help my organization run more efficiently? How do I add more value across my team? So as you think about creating your goals, you're also going to plan your roadmap for the year. Now, everybody's roadmap is subjective. If your boss says jump and you say how high, and in the middle of the year that throws off your whole plan, it happens, okay? There are projects all the time that in January I think are going to be the most important initiative of the year, and by March we're not even working on it because something else has exploded in the company. But you want to go in with somewhat of a plan of, hey, here's what I want to be doing so that I can measure whether or not I'm staying on track. It's okay to not be on track, but we want to have something to compare against. So once you have your goals made, you're going to write that out into what that means for your year, backing in from those end dates. You're going to overlay them. You can create this in Microsoft Project. You could create this in an Excel sheet. You could write this down on a piece of paper for all I care. But think about, what does this work mean from a timeline perspective? This is the tactical work that you're going to do. Once you have your roadmap, you have your goals, you have your measures of success, you're going to package all of this and you're going to take it to your direct leader. As I look forward in the new year, here's what I think our biggest priorities are. Here's how I think I fit into that and what initiatives I want to work on. Here's how I'm going to measure whether or not that got done. And here's what this means for my year. What am I missing? Odds are you're missing something because they have something in their head that they want you to do that they haven't communicated yet. But you're going to have this pre-prepared package that you can take to your boss to get feedback on. Most leaders have a really hard time operating in total ambiguity. So what will happen is if you go to them and say, hey, what are my goals for the new year? They have no idea. They don't have the time or the inclination to think that through for you. But if you go to them and you say, hey, here's what I think I should be doing. Does this resonate? Does this make sense? Does this sound like it aligns with your objectives for me? Then you can get their feedback. And then you want to tie that to your goals. So in your marketing example, if you do want to be a manager, you're going to tell them Jan 2, hey, here's my goals. Here's what I think they are. Here's my roadmap. Does this get me to manager? If I execute all of this at a high level, does it get me to manager at the end of the year? If the answer is no, then what else do you need to see from me to feel comfortable putting me up for promotion in 12 months? Now, no manager on the planet is going to agree to commit that in 12 months you'll get promoted. Nobody's going to do that. That's not what you're looking for. What you want to make sure is that the projects you're working on and the goals that you have set for yourself are strong enough and display enough skill and scope that promotion is possible. And you want to do that a whole year in advance. So once you get that buy-in and they say, well, this is close, but I also want to see your leadership skills, you need a mentee. Great. I'm going to add to my self-development, get a mentee and work with them for 6 months. I'm going to block that from March until October. And that is going to be in my roadmap so that I know I can display that skill. Then every quarter, at a minimum, you're going to revisit those goals with your boss. Hey, this is what we talked about at the beginning of the year. This one has been deprioritized and replaced with this one. All of my other goals are in flight. Do you feel like we're still on track for the end of the year? Is there anything you're seeing from me that I need to change? And is there anything missing from putting me up for promo? Every quarter, we're going to have that conversation. The big reason for this work is one, common misconception. Your manager has no clue what you're working on. I'm just being honest. Now, if your manager does know everything you're working on, they're micromanaging you. And you probably feel that in a totally different way. So instead of focusing on that, let's think about how do I inform them, right? It's not bragging. You're not annoying them. How do you think about empowering them with information so that they can make good decisions? A lot of the time, we think that by telling our boss what we're doing, we're bragging or we're wasting their time. But if they get to the end of the year and they promote somebody else on your team who didn't do half the work you did, who doesn't have half the skills you have, but did a better job of informing them what was going on, you're going to be frustrated and your boss will make a bad decision because they have limited information. You need to empower your boss to make the right choice by informing them of what's going on. So you're going to revisit that every quarter. The second reason this is important is because the way that promotions happen is completely different than how most people think. So when you start working, you probably had the same conception that I did, which is at end of year, if I ask my boss for promotion, my boss decides. Incorrect. When you go up for promotion, in 99% of companies, what happens is your manager has to initiate your promotion. That is true. So you do need your manager in your corner. But your manager is going to fill out a form that says this is what they did, this is the impact they had, these are the groups they've worked with, here's who's willing to write a referral, and they're going to submit that to their boss. And their boss is going to look at it and go, well, I never interacted with Kendall. Maybe she did all this work, but I don't know her. Is she ready to be your level when she doesn't even know me? Probably not. Or they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, you're right. Kendall's amazing. She knocked it out of the park this year. She's great. Let me take it to my boss. And then we repeat. And that form goes all the way up. Maybe it gets a stamp. Maybe it doesn't. And then it comes all the way back down. Then once your manager knows if you've been promoted or not, then they partner with HR to figure out funding, what is your salary increase, et cetera. And there's a whole separate process for that. But the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because if you're sharing your goals in January and you and your boss are aligned, this will get you ready for promo. And then in March, you talk about it again and it gets you ready for promo. Yes, you're on track. You talk about it again in June. We're at the mid-year point. Do we feel good? How's it going? And they go, yes, it's getting you on track. And you talk about it in September. Hey, are we good? Are we on track? And they say yes. And then they fill out the form because they've got all this information about you for the whole year that you've been providing, that you've been updating them. And they take it to their boss. They've probably already talked to their boss about it, right? At January, when you said you wanted to get promoted, they probably went to their boss and said, hey, just to let you know, Kendall's thinking she wants to get promoted at the end of the year. We have a plan to get her there, but we'll see how it goes, right? They're probably doing the same thing at the quarter when you follow up. So now your boss's boss is informed and aware that this is coming their way. Then when the form gets up, you know it's going to pass the first 2 levels, and then you just have to worry about senior leadership. That can come down to funding, headcount, a lot of different factors. All of this is important because if you wait until November when you do your year-end review, which is what almost everybody does, they wait till November and they go, I want to get promoted this year. Promotion forms have either already been submitted or the conversations about who's getting promoted have been happening for 8 months and you're too late. Don't wait till the end of the year. When you think of kicking off the new year right and setting your goals, one of your goals should be tied to what your expectations are at the year end. On the flip side, the benefit of this is as a leader, if you understand the goals of every individual in your team and what they're trying to accomplish within the year, it can help you craft the feedback that you give them. So if I have somebody in my team who says, hey, I really want to be a 5 out of 5 at the end of the year. I'm not worried about promotion, but I want the biggest bonus and the biggest possible merit increase. I want to be a 5 out of 5. Then throughout the year, if they drop the ball on a project, I'm going to say, hey, listen, this was a miss. Here's what we need to do in the future to make sure that we don't have this again. And this is going to impact your goal of being a 5 out of 5. We've still got 8 months left in the year. Let's do as much as we can to really offset this mistake in the eyes of your key stakeholders. Now it's easier for me as a manager to give that feedback because I understand what they're trying to accomplish. It's also easier for them to understand why this is important because it's tied to their goal. The same is true if they're doing a great job. Hey, you knocked this project out of the park. This is definitely going to help you achieve your goal of 5 out of 5 at the end of the year. Let's stay on track. So as a manager, it's a lot easier to deliver feedback, to keep people motivated and engaged, to encourage them if you understand what they're trying to accomplish. And all of this goes back to that beginning of the year goal setting. That way you make sure that you are set up for success when end of year rolls around. By the time it's the end of the year, it's too late, right? There's also a timing component here. You don't want to have a big mistake the week year-end reviews are due. It's a lot of visibility at a really important time. So making sure that you're structuring your time well over the course of your year to set yourself up for success at the end of the year when it takes place. As a manager, it's also important to be pushing your team to do this exercise. What are their goals? What are their self-development objectives? Where do they want to be at the end of the year? There's nothing wrong with having someone on your team whose goal is, I just want to do good at my job and be left alone. I'm fine with that. There's completely a place for that on every team because it's great to have people who really just are passionate about their work and do good work. It's not a problem if they don't want to move up. But if they don't want to move up, you don't want to give them higher scope projects that will help them move up either. You want to give it to the people on your team who do want to move up. It'll help you allocate work more effectively to ensure that the people on your team are meeting their individual goals. It also means that to the person who doesn't want to move up, if they're making lots of mistakes, hey, when we talked at the beginning of the year, you said you just wanted to be good at your core job, you were happy at this level, but these mistakes speak to a lack of attention of detail. If I keep seeing this, you're not going to achieve that 3 out of 5 that you're hoping for at the end of the year. I need to see that investment. I don't need you to go above and beyond, but I need you to stop making mistakes. That's an okay feedback to give because you're connecting it to their goals and your expectations. Now, the big issue is when you're a manager and everybody on your team comes to you and says, I want to get promoted this year. Okay. And I know at least one person listening has been thinking this whole time, like, but what if my whole team wants to get promoted? It's not feasible that the whole team is going to get promoted. It's just not. Very rarely could this happen. Theoretically, yes. It's not very common. So there's a few things to communicate to your team. One, remind them that when it comes time for promotion season, they are evaluated against one another and their peers across the organization, right? Maybe your team has a stellar year. Everybody in your team is 5s and everybody else in the organization is a 2. In that case, everybody on the team could get promoted. But you have to remember when I submit my paperwork for promotion, My boss is looking at every piece of paperwork that's been submitted to him and evaluating them and going, well, this person didn't really operate in the same bucket as these other people. Or this person was way higher than these people. They're definitely yes, right? So while we like to believe there's no comparison, there is. And it's good for people to understand that that's going to be a component of how this works. If I put somebody in my team up for a 5 and the other 5 saved the company $100 million this year, and my person just did their core job fine, they're not going to get the 5, right? Because there is that comparative factor. So it's important to make sure that your team understands how that works, because you don't have all the power. Even if you thought they were a 5, relative to the rest of the organization, they may not be. So explaining the process to your team, I find, is really empowering, really helpful. The other thing to do if your whole team wants to get promoted is say, great, what are you bringing to the table that differentiates you from your peers? Encourage them. At the start of my year, I had 3 employees say, hey, I want to get promoted. They all got equal opportunity. They all got equal scope. They all got equal chances to present their ideas and do great work. And one of them made it. It doesn't mean that the other 2 did anything wrong necessarily, but they didn't achieve at the same level, even though they had all the same opportunity. And so some of this is going to be, if they all want to get promoted, great, make plans with each of them. This is what I would need to see. Here's the projects you need to knock out of the park. And then we'll talk about submitting. And if all 3 of them do it, great, submit for all 3. They won't get all 3, but you can submit for all 3. And then your feedback becomes, listen, you did a great job. I really appreciate your work. I thought that you achieved our plan as we discussed. I've seen huge growth in you this year. I did put you up for promotion, but unfortunately within the team, we were limited in promotion spaces. It didn't happen this year. It's a sucky answer to give. It is. It's terrible as the manager to be the person that has to tell somebody, hey, I know we talked about you getting promoted, but it's not going to happen. But if they understand the process and if they put in the work, there's going to be an opportunity for them somewhere. And you have to be that manager that facilitates that. So bringing this all full circle, make sure you set your goals. Core, impact, self-development. Make sure you understand when you're going to complete them, who you're going to work with to complete them, what the impact of each one is, and that you have a roadmap to execute. Share all of this with your boss. Make sure you get their buy-in. Make sure that that's aligned with your goals for the end of the year and make any adjustments as necessary. And then follow up quarterly until the end of the year. I hope that this sets you guys up for success in 2024. As always, you guys can find me on Instagram at That Career Coach, TikTok, YouTube, this podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in today, and I look forward to teaching you more secrets of the corporate game.